Hello there, and welcome to Max Spoilers for Returnal for Housemarque Games. I am Kyle Hilliard. I've got Jacob Geller here with us.
Hello.
And Grant Bulmer. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, you know what? Real quick reminder. I almost forgot this. We are a Patreon. If you want to unlock a podcast version of this discussion, if you don't want a YouTube version, if you don't want to see our faces, that's an option. Join us at the $5 tier. You get all the MinnMax show, you get deepest dives, and you get max spoilers like this audio version. So we are going to spoil the hell out of Returnal. So, keep that in mind. If you clicked on this by accident or something, leave now.
If you decided it's just a game that you're never going to play because most of the discussion has been about how hard it is.
Yeah, I like having max spoilers to be that option too. Thank you for bringing that up, because I do think there are people who would avoid this game because they heard it's hard, and that's fair. I totally get that. I don't think it's quite as hard as its reputation gives it. That's not to say it's a hard game. I died a lot. I think I ended with like 100 deaths or something like that total. I don't think I'm very good at the game, but I did finish it and get the secret ending. So let's start with just basic, did you like the game? I really loved the game. I'm usually not a big roguelike guy, but this one really clicked for me in a big way, and I think right now it's my personal game of the year. Jacob, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in that regard.
Yeah, I loved it, and really kind of unexpectedly. I mean, I've played some of Housemarque's other games. I was actually a big fan of Nex Machina, which was the game that made them decide that they weren't making arcade games anymore, as far as I remember, because it didn't sell very well. But yeah, I picked this up kind of just because I like roguelikes and I like, hard games, and was really blown away by the story in a way that I did not expect. And so I think I expected to like the gameplay, and I did, but I really liked the places it went, which is what I was not expecting from the game at all.
And what about you, Grant? Where are you at with the game?
I remember asking Hanson before this came out, should I be excited for this game? I'd never played a Housemarque game before, but I absolutely love roguelites. I put a ton of hours into Enter the Gungeon, Dead Cells. I thought for sure I'd like the gameplay aspect, but similar to Jacob, this game kind of hit me like Control in a way, where it wasn't super on my radar, and then once I started playing it, I just got instantly hooked on it. Awesome game.
But yeah, it's funny. I asked Hanson similarly. I was like, do you think I will like this game after he played it a little bit? And he told me point blank, he's like, I don't think you will. Because I usually don't like roguelites. But Undermine really clicked with me earlier this year unexpectedly. I like Hades, not as much as most people, but still really enjoy it. And I think that the secret sauce for me when it comes to roguelites is not having to replay bosses. I like beating bosses and having it be that this cathartic thing that you're like, all right, I finished that. I don't have to do that again. And that's something that Undermine is, and that's something that Returnal does here, where it's if you beat the boss, you can go play them again if you want, but you don't have to. And I rarely did. I think I beat Frike a second time, once, and that was about it. And then I beat the end boss twice to get the secret ending, which we'll get into.
I never went back to the boss of the second biome.
He was the worst.
Ixion?
Yeah, it's I wrote everyone down. That's Ixion. Ixion was actually the one that gave me the most trouble, I think, overall. I don't know if you guys were kind of in a similar, if you had one that just you got stuck on or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the parts of the game that were challenging and not, because I think there's an interesting variation in that. In general, the very first step was the hardest for me. I'll say I think I'm pretty good at this game. I have 30 deaths total or whatever. I think I did it pretty quickly. But getting past Frike, the first guy, was easily the one that I tried the most. And then in the second biome, I beat that guy my first try, just because I had a really strong run at that point. And then in the later half of the game, I actually think the bosses are kind of the easiest part of that section.
I would agree with you. Yeah.
The set, the next set of 3 levels, there are only 2 bosses, and they're both not super challenging compared to the worlds that they're in.
Yeah.
I think the initial hurdle is just unlocking enough things to have something at your disposal to beat that first boss. And then also Biome 5 was definitely
Yes.
Yeah.
a severe uptick. I think that was harder than any boss for me, was the locked rooms full of enemies.
But that realization that there is not a boss was just like, that was so good, because I was like, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but you do all those rooms over and over, at least I did, over and over and over again. I was like, well, as once I get these keys, at least then I can hit my head against the boss like a brick wall often, because I want to collect these keys again. And then when I collected all the keys, and it was like, no, you're good. You can go to the next place. I was like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was weird.
Gods
I was
of
actually
what's the planet called? Atropo.
I was like well into the 6th biome, thinking that I was going to hit a boss for the 5th world before I was like, is the 5th biome's boss underwater? And then no, it turned out that there just wasn't one. But yeah, it really threw me for a loop. And I guess you could probably just say that the boss is that room where you have to fight 3 severed at the same time, which is, I think, harder than any other boss in the game.
For sure.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, Grant, go ahead.
I think I also finished, so it was around the low 30s for deaths, and I think 10 of those are probably Biome 5, if I had to wager a guess.
God, I must not be good at the game, because I definitely had a lot more deaths, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. Let's kind of start from the beginning. So if you're not familiar with Returnal, it's a game where you hold on one second, where you are stuck in this loop on this alien planet. You crash land your ship on an alien planet, and you die, and then you start over and over. That's kind of the course of the game. And you start in let's see, I got everyone written down here, the overgrown ruins. You sort of, it's this sort of Giger-inspired forest, I guess you could call it. And you fight Frike, and then you make your way to the wastes, and you fight Ixion. I'm kind of rushing through this to get to the story bit, but please stop me if you have anything you want to share about those particular areas. I mean, I guess the thing that sticks out to me early, excuse me, my throat's going crazy, early on, is that it's like, it very much feels like there will be a science fiction explanation to what's happening. You're learning about this sort of like old, sort of expired alien race, and that really kind of feels like the crux of that early area, is like you're learning. It's like, it feels very grounded, even though it's like kind of an absurd premise. It feels like you're going to get an answer. And then
you're kind of going through these things, and I guess you didn't specifically say, but is kind of in vogue for roguelikes now. The main character knows she's in a loop.
Yes.
Like early on, there
Selig.
are, when I think about like the Binding of Isaac, it's not like being stuck in a loop is a core part of that game. But in this, every time she wakes up, she's like, oh, I'm here again. And so, like, much like Hades or whatever, her repeatedly dying is as much a part of the story as, what happens when you eventually succeed.
Because, yeah, it's within the first 30 seconds of walking around that you find your own corpse for the first time. It's a really quick realization that you're stuck in a loop once you start finding your own audio logs too.
Yeah, I also got the sense, I don't know if you guys did too, that like it was almost like you were experiencing the loops out of order, right? Because like she starts, like you're in the same perspective as her. It all feels new to her, but then you learn that like she finds out that she finds her body. There's other loops, but she doesn't really have a memory of it. So like, and then it seems like you're kind of meant to assume that the loops aren't necessarily in order. At least that was my perspective. I don't know. That didn't really
I think that's exactly right. Because I mean, there would be times when it was like, this is the first time I've ever been to, the 3rd biome, and you find a audio log of her being like, I've been here so many times, I feel like I'm losing my mind. And so it's like, clearly she has been here before and she's left stuff for you. And so, yeah, that feeling of not exactly having a one-to-one relationship with her experience kind of ties into the story even more as you go on. But I thought it was really neat.
Yeah, and then of course we have to mention the house. You know, when you beat Frike, I guess you can go into the house before you beat Frike if you find the key, right? I believe so. And then you get kind of this weird, it almost feels like a vision of her past. It seems to be her home. You kind of you never learn anything concrete as a hard fact, you know, necessarily, maybe a couple things, but mostly it just seems kind of mysterious. There's the astronaut in this sort of old school NASA garb that's kind of like chasing you slowly, like stalking you, which is really weird. And I just love how strange entering that house is. I'm so excited every time that light is on. I can't wait to go in there.
It was a really cool way of doing the story, because the house pieces are kind of ambiguous as to what time you're in, I guess you could say. And also to get a reprieve from dodging a million bullets, you get a 20-second or 20-minute snippet of story built in there too. I thought that was really cool.
And just the complete kind of weirdness of it is this like 20th century farmhouse in this like H.R. Giger forest, you know, like you just walk through one of the Metroid doors and there is this house. And I think I kind of expected there would be like more stuff like that. And there's really maybe only one thing in the game that's like, here's another thing directly from Earth that we've put here. And so the house has this almost like magical quality that then gets even more so when you get into like the very end of the game.
Yeah.
But it's so striking, and those story segments are really weird. I mean, I'll say just in general, I have a hard time thinking of a game this AAA that is as kind of opaque with its story as this one. You know, like,
I would totally agree with you. Yeah.
Really do not get clear answers at almost any point, and all of the text in the game is written in like layers of riddles and all of this stuff. And I kept thinking this is when things are going to become clear, and it really didn't at all.
Grant, you mentioned Control earlier. I think maybe that's the closest. But even Control has some like legitimate answers if you seek them out. You know, I feel like this does not. You know, in a way that I love. I love that kind of, you know, I always bring up Play Dead all the time, like Inside and stuff like that, where it's just like, it's more about how you feel about what's happening than getting concrete answers. And I feel like this game's very effective at that. I was totally engaged every time I went into that house. And anytime there was a new bit of cutscene, like, I was like, everyone shut up, I gotta pay attention. You know what I mean? Like, so you beat Frike and Ixion. Other than the fifth room, which the fifth biome that we talked about a lot, Ixion gave me a lot of trouble. But I had a particularly good run, and I beat Ixion, and then I actually beat the next area, the Derelict Citadel and Nemesis, on my first try, which I was very proud of myself, and I thought that was very cool. But it also meant that I never got to use the hookshot in the Overgrown Ruins or the Ixion Wastes until I beat the game. That was like, because I got the hook shot, played through Derelict Citadel, and then I got cut off and was sent to the next set of biomes, which I thought was very weird that I ended up playing it that way. You know,
that must have been an excellent run too.
Yeah, no, it was. I had like 4 health items, and then I had an item, that thing that like gives you a 25% chance of it returning once you use it. So like I was able to fight Nemesis with like, 8 health items basically is what it kind of amounted to all in all. But that felt like a very end game boss to me, even more so than the final boss. I feel like Nemesis, with all its platforms and his scale, just felt like I was like, did I beat the game? I don't think I have,
Yeah, well, this goes into and I'm very excited to talk about what happens when you beat Nemesis, but like, there is this very clear vibe, and this is one of my bigger theories about the game, that like the first act, the first 3 biomes are very external, and then the second 3 are all very like internal. And so it's like Nemesis is the big kind of like, this is what you want the boss to be. And then the actual final boss is much more kind of cerebral and disturbing, and not as just kind of like, I'm a big alien dude, or whatever Nemesis is.
Yeah, one of the only bits of spoken dialogue outside of the things Celine says is the character that says, "I'm a big alien dude." It really surprised me.
And chills to the bone when he said that.
So Grant, Jacob and I have talked a little bit about what happens after you beat that third biome and the sort of the big story moment that you get. I'm curious what you thought of it, and like if it kind of blew your mind as much as it did Jacob and I. You can explain like what it is exactly.
Sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the scene where you see yourself essentially, or news clips of you being rescued from the island or from the alien planet. It
implies that you are rescued. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's like the news clip of astronaut recovered from I can't remember how they described the planet.
Yeah.
But and waking back up in Biome 4, both your reaction as a gamer and then Celine's reaction to this can't be happening kind of thing. It was
well, you're skipping the important part, which is like you live your life. You come
it's like
home,
you
right?
like age, you kind of have a family maybe or whatever. It's like you're 30 when you're rescued, and then you die at 90 years old. And then you wake up back on the planet.
You never left the loop, which is like insane. She died of old age instead of by tentacle aliens, and the loop starts back over. It's awesome. It's incredible. And the thing, this is a spoiler for an unreleased game, and it's the reason.
And a game that will almost certainly never be released.
Exactly. Yes, it's a game that probably will never come out. But supposedly, that was the proposed ending for the Prey sequel that was canceled. Is that you would win, you would beat the game, you would grow to become an old man and, live out the rest of your life. And when you died of old age, you would learn that you were sort of sent back to the beginning of the game because you were sort of stuck in like a loop. So I had a moment of being like, whoa, this is awesome. But then another moment of like, oh, it's weird that this was kind of what we had heard the ending of that unreleased Prey sequel was going to be. And my first thought was to look and see if there was any overlap. I couldn't find any, but it might exist. I don't know. But just conceptually, I love that idea so much of like, and also just like story-wise, just thinking that you've won and you're out of the loop, and then you learn that you never left is just like heartbreaking and awesome,
Yeah, I mean, just the kind of storytelling ballsiness of it. I just told all of my friends, I was like, you're not going to play this game, but I need to tell you about this one thing that happened, because it's really, I mean, they're kind of like, there are a couple like web comics that have toyed with this idea in interesting ways, but again, just to see like a big AAA game pull something this weird is really unusual and was really cool.
Yeah, I loved it. And then you're because every time you died originally, you saw a image of the ship crashing, right? Which to me felt, like I said, it felt like it was trying to tell a grounded science fiction story. But now when you die in this sort of second set of biomes, I feel like it's a much more kind of reflective on your life and a little bit more ambiguous, which is like getting closer and closer to what the end of the game felt like to me, which is like, just to kind of get ahead of myself a little bit, like I don't think there's really a science fiction answer for what's happening. I think that Celine is like experiencing just impossible levels of grief and sort of living out that grief over and over and over, and it's kind of like she's stuck in her own hell. She's not really an astronaut exploring a planet. That's all kind of like to fool you in the beginning. It's really just, I mean, it's sort of, if you haven't played it, it sounds kind of lame. It sounds almost kind of like, oh, it was all a dream. But like the way it's presented over the course of the experience, I think it's phenomenal. But and again, there's no solid answer. This is just like theorizing,
Yeah, but I do think you're right. I mean, it fairly specifically addresses. There's an audio log that I found actually after I had done even the secret ending of the game. You continue to find audio logs, and it was just like 7 layers for Dante, 419 layers for Tartarus or whatever. It was just like, it was very explicitly talking about hell. And so even if, and this is the thing where it's like, I don't want to say like the planet's not real, and she's in a, whatever, she's in a mental institution or something. But like, you learn and kind of experience with her that like no matter what this is, it is her hell. Like whether it's real or not, the kind of way it exists for Selene, which is maybe the only way it exists at all, is this kind of hell dimension. And with that, in the second act, things start getting like a lot more in her head, like a lot more kind of internal than they were before.
Yeah.
There's a definite tonal shift from Act 1 and 2, where, like Kyle's saying, it does feel like more like you're searching for alien technology that's going to help you escape this loop, versus Act 2, like you mentioned, it's much more internalized. The house scenes too feel much more personal, all culminating at the end of Act 6 too, when you start to realize as the player that you are just playing through her own personal grief narrative versus a science fiction tale trying to track down technology of this ancient civilization to escape their planet. It was a really well structured game. One thought I had is, if you were really good at this, like say you finished in 5 deaths, the whole story is kind of predicated that you're going to find these chunks of information through the audio logs, but I think they're random, at least the majority of them, where and when they show up. You kind of have to play and die numerous times to get more of that story element to them.
Yeah, I had that same thought. I mean, maybe they're just banking on this game is really hard, people aren't going to do that. But it is kind of like Hades. If you faced no struggle playing the game, then like the story would just not be as effective. Like they really want you, I think, to get frustrated and to kind of hit your head against these walls and do all this stuff.
Yeah, it's a fine line to ride too. I feel like they did a pretty good job though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like we were saying earlier, like some of the bosses in this sort of that second act, like I actually appreciated that they weren't quite as, I didn't find them as difficult. Like there's the guy playing, organ. He's like Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time or something, like, and then there's no boss in the 5th biome, which is cool, but that 5th biome is still brutal because it throws tons of mini bosses at you. And then you get the upgrade to let you go underwater, and you get that it was never not exciting to just jump into that pit and fall for so long, and I wonder, that might be like a PS5 thing too, that I don't know if like, a standard non-SSD hard drive could have handled. Maybe it could. I don't want to make any assumptions about the technical limitations, but
I feel like sometimes it's like, oh, they're in a long hallway because it's a loading screen, and that feels a little similar. But yeah, my favorite, like if I had to pick just like a favorite thematic thing about the game, it would be that for the first act, you are just going up. Like you make it through this forest, and then in the second biome, you are literally climbing to the top of a mountain. And then in the third biome, you get on this kind of like wrecked alien civilization, and you're just going like up and up and up this huge tower. And then in the second act, it is completely reversed, and you just go down the entire time. And like, as someone who has written a lot about like the thematic resonance of depth, like I was just so excited when I realized like, oh, the mountain is now a glacier, and then even below that, you're gonna keep sinking further down. It's such a cool, just a thematic thing to pull. I was so excited when I realized what was happening.
It's so creepy down there too. Like the whole game is creepy. Like I love how creepy it is, but especially down there, you can't see very well. I certainly fell off cliffs a couple times thinking that there was going to be landing below, and there was not, But yeah, I love that area.
To have the physics shift like that too for just one biome of being underwater, that was a really cool gameplay design too.
Yeah, and it's not so drastic that it's like unmanageable. It's just like you jump higher basically, and it feels good. Like you get it's not this whiplash where you're like, oh, I don't know how to control her anymore. It still feels pretty good,
Just subtle enough to throw you off from what you've been experiencing for the last 5 biomes.
Yeah, and you constantly have those experiences there where it's like before you could there'd be a million bullets flying at you, but you'd be like, oh, there's like a kind of alien wolf thing that's shooting these at me. And underwater, I was just kind of like blindly firing at things in the dark. Like I could not tell you what most of the stuff under there even looks like. They're just like, there's squids, and then there are orbs, and then there are things that I didn't even get close to, because if I did, they would just immediately kill me.
Yeah, I really leaned on the Hollow Seeker down there a lot. I don't know if you guys had like a favorite weapon, but just Hollow Seeker just into the sort of abyss, the abyssal scar, if you will, to like just take out those things that sort of like speed at you is just the best I could do,
I was a huge fan of the Hollow Seeker.
Oh,
especially with the serrated projectiles too.
Yeah, no, Hollow Seeker was and I didn't like it at first, but by the end it was like that was what I used to beat the end boss both times,
Likewise, I loved it.
Yeah, one of my favorite things has been just discovering that all the weapons are good. Because I had, as soon as I got the Hollow Seeker, that was like my favorite thing. And then there are several weapons that my first thought was, this is almost useless, and then later realized, oh, this is maybe the best weapon in the game. Like the Dreadbound. Did either of you use that? The one where it like bounces bullets back to you?
Yeah, we have a small magazine, but they return to you.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and so it's like, if you miss with that gun, it is almost unplayable, because the guns like shoot, or the bullets shoot way off, and then they take like a long time to come back to you. But if you can stay on target, you have just like an incredibly rapidly firing machine gun, and then you like unlock these attributes for it that make kind of all the things they're good at even more powerful in different ways. The Electro Pylon Driver was another one that I loved, that just shoots the like electrified bolts.
I couldn't figure that one out. I'm kind of jealous of your reaction, because I had a lot of situations where I was like finding these weapons, and I just never got the hang of them, and I ended up sticking with Hollow Seekers and carbines and good pistols and shotguns mostly,
Yeah, the Pylon Driver, that was the gun for me when I first picked it up. I can't do anything with this, and that's what ended up carrying me through Biome 5. Once I finally got the hang of that thing, it was amazing for in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of so like one of the kind of ways that you have progression through all your runs for the people who haven't played it is like you kind of unlock these weapon skills that then still stay on it, and so there are several guns like that like the Hollow Seeker is this kind of like SMG type rapid firing thing, but then you also get an attribute where there's just like a portal that a giant laser shoots out of it and does like a huge amount of damage, and some of these,
and it also
like
puts a smile on your face because it's so good.
It does do that, and then there's some of those like the rot gland. I think they have very good names as well, that it's like the attributes that they unlock, where it's like, well, this poisons, but now it also explodes and it leaves poison everywhere and whatever. Like they really kind of come into their own as you unlock them. And so in the different runs, if I saw something that I didn't have unlocked, I would just try and use it until I like got the next thing.
For sure. Having that randomness built in, or the weapon drops based on what you've unlocked, really made the runs easy to cater to what kind of style you wanted to play, depending upon what you found. Some of the runs that you think were just going to go nowhere, especially like the rot gland thing, once I got some of that, the trailing poison effects and the exploding effects, a gun that I didn't give much thought to all of a sudden becomes incredibly powerful. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah. So the final boss, which I guess its name is Ophion. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these things correctly. In the Abyssal Scar. I thought was one of the easier bosses in the game. Is a lot of Resident Evil energy, big red dots that you got to shoot. But I enjoyed fighting it, and it was another one that I beat on my first try, which I was really excited about. And then you sort of walk past that boss fight, and that's where you referenced it earlier. There's the house, which is the real world thing, and then here you have the car that's just underwater with the headlights on, and you can't do anything with it at this point. You do when you unlock the secret ending, which we'll go into, But you just kind of walk past it, and then you see, which I really loved, is that you had been seeing little, flecks of things like a forest overhead shot, like when you died or something like that, or maybe you saw bubbles in the water and maybe a couple other things. And then it was this cutscene that plays at the end, which is maybe the most substantial amount of like storytelling. It combines a lot of those sort of visions that you'd been seeing up to that point, and you learn that it was a moment in Celine's life where she was driving late at night with her son in the backseat holding the plush octopus that you'd seen over the course of the game and is actually in the Helios, is in your ship after a certain point. And I think the son who's we learned the son's name is Helios. The name of your ship is the name of your son. And he says, Mom, do you see the white shadow? Which is like something you've been searching for, the white shadow signal since the beginning of the game. And what they're referring to is like a literal white shadow in the road, which was like an old school NASA astronaut standing there, which was very strange. That's another thing that it's like, I don't know if that's real or if that's maybe Celine is driving tired and she just imagined it or something. But
I think Celine is the astronaut.
Yeah, yes, we can circle
back
back on that. Yeah. And speaking of circling, Celine tries to circle around the astronaut and flies
Very
off the
nice.
bridge. I know, it's perfect. But she has this moment where, what appears to happen is she falls off the bridge. It's a crash. She wakes up. It seems like she's woken up by a creature or something, and then she tries to pull her son out, but she's unable. And then it cuts to credits. Am I remembering that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know there was one audio log that I found in the 6th biome too, where it was her having a conversation with somebody else about whether she should even be working at the moment, like she'd had some type of operation or procedure. I don't know if she was driving after that. It was kind of unclear.
I think that audio log specifically references, she says like, can I drive? So I think it's like a very direct, it's like as you kind of get further into the game, it just seems like it all circles back to Celine's guilt in one way or another. And so, yeah, that seemed very clear of like probably ambiguous responsibility, but if you were her and like knew there was a risk and then ended up doing this thing, you would blame yourself for the rest of your life. And that is, what it seems like she's doing.
It's and once you find out that your child is named Helios too, it's so cool because every time you leave the first opening area, it says Helios abandoned. Little things like
I
that.
didn't even connect that dot. Wow, that stings.
Yeah, it's real hard.
Yeah, and we kind of skipped it because I kind of forgot where it appears in the timeline of the game, but it's implied at a certain point through one of the house journeys that Celine actually shot down the ship. Like, you know what I mean? Like she's participating in a loop and shoots the ship out of the sky, which like starts another loop, which that becomes a metaphor of her blaming herself for the incident of crashing Helios and abandoning Helios, which is again very brutal and sad. Yeah, and so that's credits, and it's all left very ambiguous, and you're kind of left to sort of wonder if the whole game is a metaphor for her grief over what happened with the accident, her son. And Grant, I know you haven't explored this too much, but you said you've looked into it a little bit, and you're happy to let us spoil it for you. But what you can do at that point is you can go back through each of the biomes. It's actually not as difficult as I thought it would be, which I was thankful for. I almost got all 6 in one run. I think I had to go back on one of them or something, but you
there's the ocean, like the 6th biome, apparently it doesn't show up sometimes. I was looking on the subreddit, and so people were frustrated on that, but yeah, pretty much you can get almost everything first run.
Yeah, and so you find these like 6 sun keys, they're called, and you take them to your house. And Jacob, please help me here if I'm getting any details wrong. But you take it lets you go in the house one last time, and she's very like, this is the last time I'm going into this house. And she's able to go into the basement, and you are left. I think it's at that point you see she sort of interacts with a wheelchair, and kind of sits in a wheelchair and seems to have some kind of guilt over this wheelchair. And you wake up. The house is actually turned into like just alien planet rubble. Like it kind of looks like
Yeah.
stones stacked.
It's really cool that it's very explicitly like this was never here. You know,
Yes.
that like this house that you thought you were going into just doesn't exist on this planet, which I feel like actually is an argument for the planet does exist in some sense.
Okay.
Because, you know, if it wasn't there at all, then why would it disappear? Other than maybe she, you know, found some solace or something. But yeah, it's like you kind of just look at it and it's this like big, you know, just pile of blocks. But now you are holding a car key is like the big takeaway.
Yeah. Which my reaction to that was a little bit like, oh, I guess I gotta go get to that
Yeah,
car
you got to
again.
do it one more time.
So then you go and you fight, their names I keep forgetting, Ophion again, which lets you go to the car, and then you can get in the car. And it gets really strange here because you see a creature sitting, it's like a tentacled, another like Giger character. It looks like it might be pregnant, actually, sitting in a wheelchair. And you have an argument with this creature. And if you have subtitles on, the creature I think says Celine's name, and it's attributed to Thea, Theia, which I guess is her mother.
Yeah. We haven't talked about her mom at all yet, but that is another kind of recurring thing of like, it seems like her mom wanted to be like there are two car crashes, and one of them was in Celine's youth, and one is in, you know, Celine's kind of adulthood with her son. But it seems like her mom wanted to be an astronaut, and then her mom was maybe, you know, unable to because of this crash, and that's what the wheelchair means as well. Maybe.
Yeah, it's nothing is sort of, you can't take anything at face value in the game ultimately. And I think that's, and you have the argument, she says your name, and then I think the last scene is her sort of, you suddenly are in the astronaut costume, the old school astronaut costume, and it's implied that Celine was the astronaut in the road that caused her own accident. And then the game ends with her swimming upward, and I think she says Helios, and then you get credits again. Does that seem right, Jacob? I actually have footage of it if you're watching this on YouTube of all that, so you can real time fact check me.
It's interesting because it's like it doesn't really like we keep saying, there is no concrete like this is what happened. It's just kind of another layer of like everything in Celine's life is cyclical, and everything comes back to her continuing to kind of like trap herself in this loop of trauma and grief. And so it's like you saw that she shot down her own spaceship, and so clearly it's already like the metaphor is she's trapped herself, but putting herself in the astronaut, it's like even more so like she is the reason that she's feeling this way. And yeah, it's really kind of brutal. And also that astronaut, I mean, I know we talked about it before, but like it's so cool that it's not designed to look scary. Do you know what I mean? Like it just looks like a normal astronaut costume. But
it's all presence, you know?
Yeah. Just like the way that it shows up is really spooky.
You even have lunch or breakfast with it as a child, right? Like sitting at the table, it's just eerie. It's just so eerie and strange.
There's that part as the child when you are playing the game on a PS5.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that part?
That's and there's a stack of House Smart games under there too.
Yeah,
like,
that's a little coy, but yeah, there's a part where it's like the screen. I thought my game had frozen, and then it zooms out and it shows the game that you were currently playing on a television, and you have a child's hands and you're holding like a DualSense.
Yeah. I talked a little about sort of my theory, I guess you could say, of like I don't think any of it's real. Ultimately, is kind of my like it's all just sort of grief and living grief over and over in this sort of personal hell that she's created for herself. It's kind of how I feel about it. Grant, do you have any kind of like big takeaways that you kind of like how you feel like the game concludes, or what you think was happening over the course of the game?
I think I'm on board with you that it is just a construct of her own guilt that you're replaying through. And the ending of Act 1 almost feels like she's starting to forgive herself, with seeing her living her life like that, but then is still sucked into the guilt of Act 2. Gosh, it is really hard to come up with anything concrete to say about the story because it is so ambiguous, and the parallels between your story and your mom's story kind of intertwining. But I think I am in the camp that it is just a figment of her imagination through her own grieving process.
Yeah, what do you think, Jacob? I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, but yeah, if you want to expound. Maybe make a video essay about it. I don't know.
We'll see. I'll tell you, I did not think this was going to be like a game that I would kind of do my style of video essay thing about it when I started playing, and then as I went on, I was like, oh, maybe. I like the idea that there is some reality to the planet, just because I think it's kind of more interesting if something both exists and is a metaphor than something that is solely a metaphor and doesn't have any, like real life counterpart.
Sure.
But I also think it is the sort of thing where, like, I don't want to get Dark Souls lore on this, where we're kind of digging to find the objective truth and then miss, like, the symbolism, which I think is what we've been talking about in large part for good reason. I really like that the game pushes you into thinking about things in a non-literal way, whether or not I think that Atropos is a real place. Also, just another note is that all of these names are like Greek myth names that I don't know enough about. But I mean, like, Helios is an obvious one, but I'm pretty sure all the bosses and, Thea and Atropos and whatever all have some mythic quality that would shine, further light on the events of the game.
Yeah, and I mean that actually, and if in that idea of like the planet does exist in some capacity, maybe she went there and lived and she experienced it and got rescued, and then at the end of her life sort of got trapped in this grief loop again, and that the second half of the game, Act 2, maybe that's her kind of imagining it more. But I mean, if you think about astronauts like visiting alien planets and naming things, they would lean on Greek mythology.
Yeah. One thing that I really like, the ship's log has a lot of kind of correspondence that I didn't even realize was there until the end of the game. But one of the things that's in there is a real speech written by whoever the president was at the time of the first moon landing. That's kind of famous now, or at least I've seen several times on the internet. That's like the speech that they would have given if the astronauts were stuck on the moon. Did you see that?
No, I've never heard that. That's
Oh, it's really cool. It's worth looking up because it's like public record of, I'm going to look up what president was just to say, but it was like, if they managed to successfully land on the moon, but then couldn't get off, what would the speech have been?
That's wild.
And so it would have been JFK saying, like, they explored the final frontier and now they will end their days there. And it's like, it's really kind of creepy to hear the like presidential language that goes into it. But having it in your ship's log is just another kind of hint at like, you're stuck here, whether you get off or not. In many ways, you're just stuck here forever.
Yeah, no, I totally missed that. That's awesome and horrifying, but awesome. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to say about this game because it is so sort of just a lot of symbolism and strangeness that it's like you can sort of dive, into the abyssal scar as much as you want. But like, yeah, I think we covered a lot of the big beats that I found so fascinating. You know what I mean? I ultimately I just love how not straightforward it was. Like, even from early on showing trailers for the game and stuff, I knew there would be some sort of weird, thoughtful meditation with her discovering her home on the alien planet and stuff like that. But it ended up being much more sort of ambiguous and dark than I expected in a way that I really, really loved. I really loved Returnal, much more than I expected to.
I went in completely dark into this too, which I think was a good choice in retrospect. They really swung for the fences with this one too, as a PS5 exclusive, and there's not a lot of things to be playing right now. I think they did a really good job, and I'm really curious to see what Housemarque does next. I'm a fan now for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. It was when they announced that they were kind of moving away from arcade games, there was a bit of like sadness to that. People were like, I like their arcade games. I want them to keep making that. But when the sort of result is this story-driven game with just amazing controls and sort of like that sort of arcade influence on the action, like I think they made the right call.
It's still, it's
please
still
more
really
like
arcadey.
this,
I feel like they, as a fan of their previous games, I feel like all that DNA is still here. I mean, we didn't even, because the story is so interesting, we didn't talk that much about like just how dang fun this game is. Like it is really fun to play. And I would also say for people who have listened to this whole thing, but maybe are still on the fence, like I think it's a pretty inverse difficulty curve in that the beginning of the game is basically the hardest it's ever going to be, at least in terms of just like your skill versus what the game expects of you. And so if you can kind of push through that first hurdle, you might have an easier time than you expect with it. It makes sense that a lot of the conversation about this game is how hard it is, but I think it's kind of going to be a Dark Souls thing of like, after that has settled down,
after you beat
we'll
Frank.
be able to have after we'll be able to have like a more kind of interesting conversation on like it's hard, but it's doable, and here are all the really interesting things that it's doing.
It was a fine line. The story was really well done, and the gameplay, the controls are just beyond tight. I had so much fun with the shooting in this game. I really hope it does well in sales numbers, because it feels like the hardest game right now is getting a PS5 still.
Right. Yeah.
So I hope when people are able to get a PS5 that they still play this game and go back to it if you don't end up getting a PS5 until like the holidays.
There aren't that many PS5 exclusives. So if you want to see what your system can do, this is like one of 3 things.
Yeah. Yeah, it is one I've been pushing friends toward, because they're like, I heard that you can't save, and which is true, and it would be nice to save in the middle of a run, but like it's not quite as bad as the sort of reputation that it's received at this point. So, no. I mean, I
lost one run, I think, because of an update before I turned off auto updates when I was going to use rest mode.
Yeah.
I mean, that one's on me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I guess it's odd to say if you've listened to this whole thing and you're still on the fence, but like it's good. Like I said, I think, we'll see how I feel at the end of the year, but I really liked Resident Evil 8 a lot, but I think this is my favorite so far this year. It's really great stuff. But any final thoughts from either of you guys?
I think I'm in that same camp that, I mean, Valheim, the gameplay isn't as much fun to me, but just the fun I'm having playing through that game might give it the game of the year. But in terms of gameplay so far, this is absolutely my number one.
Yeah. I guess my only other bit of advice would be, don't be afraid to put on a podcast. I definitely did some runs while like listening to podcasts or whatever, and it's like I feel like part of the thing of like getting okay with roguelikes is just knowing that you're not going to make true progress every time, and that's fine. So if it's your first time with the genre, it's okay to die a bunch. Like that doesn't mean you're doing things poorly.
Living proof right here. I died like 3 times as much as you guys. I had a great time. But thanks so much, Jacob. Why don't you plug your YouTube channel? What's the...
Sure. My YouTube channel is just Jacob Geller. You can go there and see me talking about things, and maybe at some point Returnal. If nothing else, it will almost certainly be on my top games at the end of the year.
Yeah. Any plugs for you, Grant?
I'll plug Jacob's channel as well.
MinnMax.
You're already at MinnMax, but in case you found it some other way, that's MinnMax with 2 N's.
Yeah.
That's all I got for plugs.
What's some of the stuff? You were on the Final Fantasy VII remake, Deepest Dive. We were on that together.
Mm-hmm.
What other stuff? You the early cooking stuff you were involved with, right? There's more, Grant. You can find more, Grant.
I think Mint Snacks needs a revival.
Yeah, we're getting there.
And also the world's greatest VR fishing game, Monsters of the Deep, Final Fantasy.
Right.
Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but yeah,
And there's more Final Fantasy content happening, at least in the world. I won't speak for MinnMax, but there is more Final Fantasy VII coming into the world next month. So it seems likely.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we'll probably talk about it on MinnMax. We'll see. But yeah.
I've got a hunch it'll show up.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for tuning into this episode of Max Spoilers. We got a lot more Max Spoilers out there. Resident Evil 8 was another one that we did recently with Serial Vasquez. So go check that out. And we talked a little bit about Deepest Dives, Final Fantasy VII Remake, of course. And right now we're doing Mass Effect 1, which they're, at the time of this recording, they've only released the first of, I think, a planned 3 episodes of that. So go check that out. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Let's. I think I might even play some more Returnal. The trophies are kind of messed up, but I think I might go still try to get. Maybe might go for that platinum. We'll see. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You can help support independent games media by subscribing to MinnMax on YouTube here, or you can support us over on Patreon to unlock exclusive shows like MinnMax Council. You can call into our podcast, you can put a picture of your choice on every MinnMax video, or you could have us plug your passion project on the MinnMax Show podcast. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better, and we exist because of you. Any help telling a friend's appreciated.